We're going to take a break, come back with more Renee Ritchie, Jason Snell. Great to have you both in-house. Andy Yanako, more about Mac. In fact, we're going to say goodbye to 2 Mac institutions, Apple institutions, in our next segment. But first, a word from LegalZoom.com. Julio Ojeda-Zapata, writing in the Minneapolis Twin Cities Pioneer Press, sad to say, the end of the very first Apple dealer after 35 years. FirstTech is shuttering its doors. Started in the early 70s. I mean, late 70s, I should say, when Apple first started selling Apple IIs. So it started as Team Electronics, became FirstTech. And, you know, I've seen this happen. You probably remember Tom Santos and Mac Adam down on Harrison Street in San Francisco. And I remember him going out of business some years ago. He said, I can't compete with Apple. They've got their own stores now. Yeah. They get the products, much better allocations than we can ever get. You can offer service and support, as Tom did for years, but eventually people just stop going to you.
It's a different world now. I mean, the Apple retail stores have totally changed that game. I remember, this era, that's when I got my first Apple II, was at a store. I remember walking in the doors. It was in Modesto, California, and it was like beige carpet with beige tables and beige computers on them. Yeah. And salesmen, and it was a different world. And some of those stores survived by adapting, but it's not like, when we were talking about Comic-Con earlier. When I go to Comic-Con, I hear comic book retailers talk about this, and their business is a little different, but it's also changing dramatically because people aren't buying stuff in paper anymore, and the rise of digital retailers. It's not that different than the rise of Apple retailing, where you can survive by building a community, being super supportive. But even then, it's just a brutal business to be in because the world has changed.
Or being in an area that there is no Apple store and serving those remoter areas. But you look at a normal Apple store now; they have machines that are in the back that they just go and use to replace screens on iPhones.
Yeah,
you can't get those machines.
Yeah. Here's a video from when the Macintosh came out that features that store, the FirstTech store in Minneapolis. This harkens back to 1977 when the first Apples were sold. More than 5 million machines sold, all started in Minnesota, the first Apple store. It really is a bit of history. I don't think they had Hummers back then.
One of the biggest success stories, I guess, would have to be what was known as Team Number One. Team Number One was
back when the Russians invaded. That was before the Wolverines beat them back.
Schwarzenegger had a
Team Central was the central organization.
You're listening to Wayne Westlaff, who was
Apple Store. Nice.
Apple Store. I remember this. I remember there was an Apple Store in San Francisco. They had every bit of Apple software.
They've now changed their name to
every
FirstTech,
single Mac
the
program.
of the Team Electronics stores. But to my knowledge, that would make them the longest continuous.
You'd go in there to buy software,
Apple reseller.
And you talk to somebody, and they,
And like a comic book store,
look at the Lisa.
You could talk to somebody who was mean and dismissive to you, or you could talk to somebody who was great and you wanted to come back and buy stuff from them.
Father's office.
That's certainly Bell and Howell Apple II, very nice. Oh yeah. But that's part of the problem too. People who silent type thermal printer.
Oh man,
this is like for like 2 generations earlier. What looking at classic cars is what I get from looking at.
Yep.
That's the silent type. I remember I printed out my first AppleSoft programs on it.
Anyway,
he used to race those in his youth.
Great article by Julio in the Pioneer Press, and you can see it online as well. And he sent us a link to that. I'm glad he did. Thank you, Julio, for writing that story.
The other problem they're facing is that remember that like when stores like that were doing really, really well, it wasn't just getting that interaction from Apple. It was also the idea that most people coming in, that was their first time they had an opportunity to actually put their hands on a real home computer. And now one of the things that makes it so easy to order online is that I know what computers are, I know how they work, I know what I want. I don't have to have someone walk me through, do I need a floppy drive or is the cassette tape going to be okay for me?
So and another late lamented website, MacFixit.com, which is owned by CNET at this point, and CNET silently shut it down. An article from Ted Landau, who was the creator of MacFixit way back, hard to believe, in 1996. It was a site I used all the time, a place to go to see what people were doing about bugs, whether this was a known bug. Yeah. He managed the site for 4 years, he said, sold it to Tech Tracker, which did the same thing for all computers. In 2000, he was editor to 2002. And I guess the last man standing Topher Kessler, who has been the primary contributor to Mac Fix-It under CNET, has started a new site, Mac Issues. So same idea. We'll send people to macissues.com. But it's, I mean, I loved Mac Fix-It. I used it all the time. And it was the place I'd go. Somebody would call me on the radio show and say, hey, have you heard about this? And I said, let me check. Let's see.
This is, I know this is kind of inside baseball, but CNET bought Tech Tracker because they wanted the version tracker. We think Mac users think about version tracker, but they wanted especially the Tech Tracker software database for download.com. And they wanted to integrate that data. They eliminated a competitor, but they also integrated all that updates data into their database, which was like strategic for them. The version tracker stuff, less so. And then there was Mac Fix-It, which wasn't like the other two things. And so they inherited it, and it kind of kept going. But I think this was inevitable because that purchase was never meant to be about Mac Fix-It. And CNET's history with Apple-based information is not very strong.
Well, and I got to tell you, frankly, you guys don't run into this probably, but Windows users do all the time. Download.com, their download site, is notorious now for layering adware upon adware upon your downloads, because what you get is, instead of the original file, you get an original file wrapped in a downloader, which installs a lot of crap. It is so close to malware, it's hair's breadth distance.
Some of my very first Mac software reviews are, I think, in that database somewhere.
Really?
Only because I worked at Ziff Davis.
Right.
The Ziff Davis software library went to ZDNet, which got bought by CNET. And I'm sure my 5-mouse review of Drag Thing from 1995 is still there somewhere.
Anybody wants to?
We're like blues musicians that, like, we're given $50 and a bottle of Ripple to record 8 songs, and now it's owned by 8 companies.
Michael Jackson owns it now. I don't know how that